The house was very quiet. Millie walked inside. Her feet made small taps. Each tap came back like a voice. She learned to measure the rooms by echoes. One step, pause. Another step. The morning light slid through curtains. Thin spears of sun lay on the shiny floor. Millie moved like a small mouse. She opened books slow. She closed cupboards gently. She did tiny things so the quiet would not startle. Sometimes the quiet felt big and surprised her back. She watched her long shadow stretch on the floor. The rooms felt wide, like a big bowl. Millie learned the house's hush. She kept her noises small. The house listened. She counted rooms with tap-tap. She walked slow to not wake the house. One warm afternoon, Millie wandered by the old stone wall. Moss wrote green letters on the stones. She touched each seam like reading Braille. The stones felt cold under her fingers. Her hand moved along cracks and tiny grooves. Suddenly, something silver flashed in the sun. She picked it up. It was a small key. The top looked like a curled leaf. Millie turned the key in her palm. It felt heavy and small. She mouthed, "What does this open?" as if the key might answer. The key felt like a promise. Millie kept it safe in her hand. She followed the wall slowly, pushing vines aside. Leaves brushed her cheeks. Millie pushed aside a curtain of ivy and found a tiny wooden door. The door was small enough for a rabbit. She fit the little key into the worn lock. Her fingers smelled like dust and cookies. The key turned with a soft sigh. Click. The hinge whispered as the door opened. A new air stepped out. The backyard she knew was neat and flat, but this place was different. Sun fell in round patches, like gold coins. The flowers looked sleepy. Their heads bowed as if they were saying, "Not yet." Two trees stood like tired guards. The soil looked crumbly and pale. A bird bath sat quiet with dry leaves at its rim. Butterflies clung to old stems. A single bluebell leaned, as if still trying to wake up. The colors felt softer and warmer than the yard. The sound felt softer too. Millie's chest filled up. She took a small breath. The garden smelled like wet earth and small hope. She stepped in slowly. Her shoes made a new, gentle sound. Her face opened wide. Millie gasped like a cartoon pop of wonder. She looked at the small world and felt it ask for help. She felt ready. A little breeze moved leaves. A small bird peeped from a branch. Millie touched the bluebell. It felt cool. She whispered, "This garden needs a friend." Her voice sounded small, but it reached the trees. Millie smiled. Millie knelt in the soft soil. Her knees pressed into the dirt of the small bed. She dug with her fingers and a little trowel. She pulled out weeds slowly, careful not to hurt roots. She took from her pocket the seeds she had kept. One by one, she placed them in quiet holes. She pressed each seed like a sleeping head. Millie hummed a slow tune while she worked. She patted the earth gently. The garden seemed to listen. Millie decided to be its friend. She promised to come back. Days passed in small checks. Millie watered at dusk. A slug left a silver trail. Ants marched in straight lines. A lone bluebell tilted up. Her notebook filled with tiny drawings. She tucked seeds from her pocket into neat rows. The garden listened. Millie learned to speak with the garden. She made compost from apple peels and tea leaves. She buried them under small rocks where worms could feast. She drew sun maps in her notebook. She watched which corner stayed damp at noon. She poked the soil with a finger to feel if it was sandy or sticky. She tried tiny experiments. A little sand here, a handful of crushed shells there. She wrote the results in neat lines. Days passed and tiny green shoots pushed up. The garden began to remember its shape. Millie smiled at the first brave leaves. She logged each change. The work was slow, it was steady. The garden changed because she watched and did the next small thing. One day, a boy stood under the ivy. He had dark hair and round glasses. A whistle hung from his lips. Paper birds peeked from his pockets. He smiled and said, "I listen." He whistled low notes that made the air hum. Far off, birds answered with bright trills. Oliver copied their sounds. The birds grew curious and came closer. Millie watched with wide eyes. Oliver set out seeds and charts. He brought songs for quiet places. Millie and Oliver worked as a small team. They built a trellis from twigs and string. Millie tied knots. Oliver checked the bird chart. Beans climbed the sticks like tiny fingers. They planted rows and painted small wooden signs. Millie wrote pocket stars and laughing daisies with bright paint. Oliver whistled to call bees and birds. Bees came and found blooms. Butterflies drifted like tiny sails. They split tasks. Millie kept her hands in the soil. Oliver kept yotes and sketched visitors. Together they learned which seeds brought which friends. The garden grew a little bolder each day. They laughed when paint spattered on their noses. They measured sun and moved a feeder to a safe branch. They made a small seat from crates so a hedgehog could rest. One night, a hard wind blew. It rushed over the garden and flattened a bed of seedlings. The next morning, Millie ran to the patch. The tiny plants lay pressed flat and gray. Millie felt her chest tighten like a knot. Her hands trembled as she picked them up. She felt small and sad. She did not know if they would wake. She sat with the plants and breathed slow. The loss felt heavy. She held on to hope. Oliver came with soft netting and steady hands. They stretched the net low over the seedlings and tied it to small sticks. The plants could still breathe, but they were safer. Millie and Oliver made a slow drip from an old bottle so water could trickle all day. They built a crate seat for a hedgehog. When the soil was heavy, they mixed in sand and smashed shells to help it drain. Aphids came once, and they put ladybugs under a jar to raise them. Each fix was a small test. Each success taught them more. The garden grew stronger because they kept doing the next right thing. Mr. Whitaker walked into the garden with big steps. His shadow fell across the bench. Millie held her spade and stood very still. Oliver reached into his bag and pulled out a neat scrap of paper. He handed it to Mr. Whitaker like a small treaty. The paper had drawings and numbers. It showed where the sun and the shade were. It showed a plan for a little fence and notes about water. Mr. Whitaker read slowly. His frown did not melt right away. He lifted the signs and the tidy trellis. He saw the bird feeder and the seat. He saw the robin nest. The garden looked like a plan that was also a gift. The three of them waited while he thought. Mr. Whitaker read the paper. Then he looked up at a small stone in the wall. 2 letters and a tiny heart were carved there. He stood very still. Millie and Oliver watched. His face grew softer. He told them he remembered Rosemary. He told them about his wife. She used to plant herbs by a wall like this. Millie stepped forward and pulled a fresh sprig of rosemary from her pocket. The smell was bright. She gave it to him. He held it as if it was a long-lost note. They spoke about rules and safety. Millie said they would care for the garden. Oliver showed the water and bird notes. Mr. Whitaker touched the carved heart. He let out a deep breath. Then he chose to let them keep the garden. He asked that it be kept safe and neat. The 3 of them agreed. Summer moved on. The garden grew full of color. Beans climbed the trellis. Daisies and pocket stars opened. Bees and butterflies came back. Children from the lane sat on the crate seat and pressed their hands into the cool soil. They learned to be gentle. Children learned to plant seeds, too, the rooms. Mr. Whitaker wrote, "Garden, shared maintenance," in his ledger, and came to prune and sip tea with Oliver. He smiled sometimes and nodded. Millie left tiny painted stones and paper birds. At night, she dreamed of other small doors. In the morning, she woke to petals on her windowsill. The garden kept waking, and people kept tending. The secret became a welcome place.